The county sold Dr. Lena Hart a condemned cheese plant for $1,100. The farmers in the back row laughed so hard the auctioneer had to clear his throat before calling the next lot. They thought she had bought black mold, frozen pipes, and a criminal cleanup bill. They thought grief had finally eaten what was left of her judgment. They were wrong. 16 months later, federal agents, corporate lawyers, private security contractors, and the richest food executives in America would be standing outside that same rotting creamery in Copper Falls, Wisconsin, trying to figure out how one broke scientist had grown an empire underneath the floor. The gavel came down again. Sold! $1,100 to the woman in the gray coat. The room went quiet for half a second. Then the whispers started. Not because the price was high. It was insultingly low. But because everybody in Copper Falls knew the Harker Creamery was not a property. It was a warning. 30 years ago, it had been the pride of the county. Milk tankers lined the road before sunrise. Cheddar blocks rolled out by the ton. Families lived off that place. Then came the leak. A buried brine tank split open under the aging rooms. Caustic wash, spoiled whey, and industrial cleaning residue seeped into the ground for weeks before anyone admitted what had happened. The state shut the creamery down. The owners vanished into bankruptcy. The county capped the underground rooms, fenced off the loading dock, and let the building rot. By the time Lena bought it, the roof sagged like wet cardboard. The brick walls were streaked with frost. The air inside still smelled faintly of old milk and bleach. The soil restriction was permanent. No grazing, no crops, no food processing permit without a full environmental review. To anyone else, the place was dead. But Lena Hart did not look at the dead roof. She looked under it. She signed the deed at the folding table near the exit. The county clerk, a narrow man named Paul Vetter, slid the keys across as if they might infect him. "You understand the restriction, Dr. Hart," he said. "Nothing edible can come out of that ground." Lena folded the deed once, very carefully. "Good," she said. "I don't need the ground." Before Copper Falls knew her as the woman who bought the cursed creamery, Lena had been the best fermentation engineer at Meridian Foods. Meridian did not call itself a meat company. It called itself a food security platform. That was how companies spoke when they wanted the world to forget they owned slaughterhouses, fertilizer contracts, feed monopolies, and half the refrigerated rail network between Omaha and Philadelphia. Lena had spent 12 years inside Meridian's research division, building proteins from microbes. She could make yeast produce milk fat. She could turn waste starch into amino acids. She could read a fermentation curve the way old farmers read clouds. Then she found the internal medical files. Meridian's growth enhancer, Yield Max 9, was being sprayed across contract feed farms. Workers were getting tremors, migraines, memory loss. One 19-year-old in Nebraska could no longer button his shirt without help. Lena reported it. Meridian's CEO, Victor Rusk, smiled in the meeting where she thought he would help her. 2 weeks later, her badge stopped working. Within 6 months, Rusk had taken her patents, buried her in lawsuits, destroyed her professional references, and leaked enough rumors to make every grant committee in the country call her unstable. Her husband left first. Then the house went. Then the last research job. By the time she walked into the county auction, all Lena had left was a pickup truck, $17,000 in borrowed money, and a notebook she never let out of her coat pocket. Victor Rusk believed he had removed her from the future of food. He had only removed the lights. That afternoon, Lena drove through sleet to the Harker Creamery. She cut the rusted chain from the gate with bolt cutters and parked beside the old milk intake bay. Snow moved sideways across the yard. The building stood alone at the edge of a frozen cornfield, its windows boarded, its smokestack cracked, its loading dock half collapsed. Inside, the plant was a museum of failure. Broken conveyor belts, empty wash tanks, moldy insulation hanging from the ceiling in gray strips. A row of abandoned employee lockers with names still written on tape. Lena walked through it all without touching anything. At the center of the building, beneath a carpet of dust and mouse droppings, she found the square steel access door. The county had welded it shut after the shutdown. Below it were the old brine aging vaults, 3 concrete rooms buried 18 feet under the plant, built to keep cheese cool through Wisconsin summers before modern refrigeration was cheap. She knelt, brushed away the dust, and set a temperature probe on the steel. 47 degrees. Not warm enough, but stable. She smiled for the first time in months. Rusk had taken the pilot plant. He had taken the sterilizers. He had taken the sequencing suite and the boardroom, and the men who wore watches worth more than her truck. But he had not taken the thing that mattered. Lena still understood organisms. She whispered into the empty creamery, "Let's see you patent darkness." The first 90 days nearly broke her. She worked at night because Copper Falls watched everything. At the hardware store, she bought insulation foam, vapor barriers, stainless fasteners, sump pumps, medical-grade tubing, ultraviolet lamps, air scrubbers, pressure sensors, and enough copper wire to make the clerk ask whether she was opening a clinic or hiding a submarine. She paid cash whenever she could. When she could not, she used the last credit card Meridian had not managed to freeze. By mid-December, the rumors had ripened. At Marge's diner, old dairymen leaned over their coffee and discussed Lena Hart like weather. "Nobody buys sterile tubing for an abandoned creamery unless she's cooking something," one said. "Or burying something," another replied. The loudest voice belonged to Dale Crone, who had lost his herd the year Meridian bought the local feed mill. "I saw blue lights through the windows at 2 in the morning," Dale said. "A woman alone in that place? That's not business. That's a breakdown." The rumor reached the county inspection office by lunch. By evening, it reached Nina Sloan. Nina was the county's agricultural compliance officer. She was smart, careful, and trapped. 3 years earlier, her younger brother had been charged in a warehouse theft outside Milwaukee. The case should have been local. Somehow, Meridian's lawyers found it. They paid for the brother's defense, made the charges soften, and then sent Nina a message without sending a threat. Victor Rusk had a gift for buying people who still thought of themselves as honest. So when Nina saw Lena Hart's name attached to the Harker deed, she did not file a routine inspection. She called Meridian. Victor Rusk took the call in a glass office above Lake Michigan. He was a thin, silver-haired man with the calm of someone who had never personally paid for any damage he caused. "She's in Copper Falls," Nina said. "Working nights, large equipment deliveries, unusual electrical demand." Rusk looked at the city below him. "Lena is finished," he said. "But finished people can still start fires. Find the violation." "Structural?" "Anything." "Environmental?" "Better." "Criminal?" "Best." He hung up. Below the creamery, Lena had already turned the dead vaults into a living machine. The first room became filtration and power. The second became inoculation. The third became the growth hall. She lined the concrete with reflective film, hung stainless steel mesh curtains from ceiling rails, and built a closed misting system from scavenged dairy pumps. Where cheese wheels had once sat in quiet rows, there were now vertical sheets of woven mycelial scaffold waiting in the dark. Her project was called Marrow. Not lab-grown meat in the way investors understood it. No fetal serum, no billion-dollar stainless bioreactors, no cells coaxed along like royalty. This was older and stranger. A strain of food-safe filamentous fungus Lena had engineered during her last months at Meridian. She had taught it to build muscle-like fiber, store fat in clean white seams, and bind heme-like compounds into deep red tissue. Fed the right vapor of oat sugars, pea nitrogen, minerals, and thyme, it did not imitate meat as flavoring. It grew into it. 24 days. That was her target. 24 days from spore to harvest. A steer needed years: pasture, grain, antibiotics, transport, slaughter, and a chain of middlemen. Marrow needed darkness, humidity, and a scientist everybody had mistaken for ruined. On the night she started the first cycle, Lena stood in the growth hall, wearing a patched white clean suit and nitrile gloves. Her breath sounded loud inside the hood. She poured the thawed culture into the primary feed reservoir. The liquid was pale and unimpressive, like diluted milk. She opened the valve. A silver mist crept along the floor, rose through the mesh curtains, and vanished into the dark. Lena rested one gloved hand on the tank. "Grow," she said. Then winter came down hard. Copper Falls vanished under snow. The temperature dropped to 20 below. The roads iced over. The creamery's roof groaned under white weight. Lena slept in a sleeping bag beside the filtration room because every degree mattered. She ate crackers, canned soup, and coffee so burnt it tasted like rust. She ran extension lines through walls that should have been condemned and bypassed an old municipal meter because she had to choose between legality and keeping the culture alive. She knew it was stupid. She did it anyway. By day 24, she had lost 15 pounds and all sense of time. She climbed down the ladder before dawn, fingers trembling from cold and caffeine. The growth hall was dark. The only light came from the red safety strips along the floor. She switched the spectrum over. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the overhead lamps warmed to white. Lena stopped breathing. The mesh curtains were no longer bare. They sagged under thick crimson sheets of living protein. Not blobs, not paste, sheets, dense, striated, marbled through with pale fat, hanging in folds like butcher cuts in a freezer that had forgotten the animal. Condensation slid down their surfaces. The air smelled clean, earthy, and metallic. Lena walked to the nearest sheet as if approaching a sleeping thing. She pressed a sterile blade into it. Resistance. Then give. The cut opened in a clean red line, veined with white. She laughed once, sharp and broken. Then she started to cry. She trimmed a palm-sized piece, carried it to the little induction burner she had hidden in the utility room, and placed a cast-iron pan on the coil. Butter melted. The sample hit hot iron. The smell filled the underground room so completely that Lena had to put one hand against the wall. No bean paste, no substitute, no apology. Fat rendered at the edge, the crust browned, the center stayed tender and red. She bit into it standing up. For 3 seconds, the world left her. Then she whispered, "Rusk is dead." The lamps snapped off. The pumps dropped in pitch. Every alarm on the panel screamed at once. Lena ran to the breaker box. The illegal line had tripped under the combined load of heating, filtration, and the blizzard overhead. Backup batteries gave her 6 hours before the vault temperature fell below survival range. Above ground, a county utility truck idled at the end of the drive. Nina Sloan sat in the passenger seat, watching vapor leak from a crack in the Creamery roof. The utility worker beside her stared at his tablet. "That building just pulled more power than the high school," he said. "No permit, no active meter. Whatever she's doing in there, it is not legal." Nina thought of Victor Rusk. Find the violation. She got out into the wind with a flashlight and a citation pad. The front door was blocked from inside. The side door splintered when she kicked it. Inside, the creamery was black and freezing. Nina swept her flashlight over the wreckage, broken tanks, old tile. Dust disturbed in a narrow path toward the center room. She followed the path to the steel hatch. Fresh welds, fresh grease, warm air breathing around the seam. Nina pulled it open. A column of humid air rose into her face, carrying a smell no abandoned dairy plant had any right to hold. Butter, earth, blood-warm iron. Lena Hart, Nina called down. County compliance. I'm entering the lower level. She climbed into the dark. Halfway down, her flashlight caught the first hanging sheet, then the second. Then the room opened around her. Nina froze at the bottom of the ladder. Rows of red, marbled protein hung from stainless mesh in the red emergency glow. No carcasses, no animals, no blood on the floor. Just living curtains of impossible meat breathing under mist. "What is this?" she whispered. Lena stepped from behind the control bank, holding a wrench in one hand and a pan-seared strip in the other. Her face looked hollow from exhaustion. Her eyes did not. "It's what Meridian was afraid I might build," Lena said. Nina raised her hand toward the radio clipped to her jacket. "Lena, this is an unlicensed food facility, an electrical theft, and probably 6 biohazard violations I don't even have names for." "Yes." "Then you understand I have to report it." "No," Lena said. "You understand what happens if you do." Nina's thumb hovered over the radio. Lena took one step closer and held out the cooked strip. "Rusk gets it. He locks it. He sells the world a cleaner cage with his name on the patent. Then he keeps spraying yield max on the people too poor to refuse his contracts." Nina's jaw tightened. Lena lowered the wrench. "Or you taste it." From above, the utility worker shouted down the shaft. "Nina, you okay? Smells like somebody opened a steakhouse under there." Nina stared at the piece of meat. Every rule she had ever enforced stood between her and that bite. So did her brother's legal bills. So did Victor Rusk's voice. She took it. The crust cracked softly between her teeth. Then the fat released. Her expression changed before she could hide it. It was beef. Better than beef. Clean, rich, almost sweet at the finish, with the deep mineral warmth of a dry-aged ribeye. Nina swallowed. "My God. I can grow 8,000 pounds every 24 days in this room," Lena said. "At 51 cents a pound before packaging. Meridian's premium line costs them nearly $5 before distribution. I can undercut them until their monopoly bleeds out. But if the heat drops below 40 degrees, the whole first strain dies before sunrise." "Nina," the utility worker called again. "I'm calling the sheriff." Nina looked up the ladder. Then she looked back at the hanging red sheets. The decision took 5 seconds. It changed everything. "Don't call anyone," she shouted. "False emergency. Old refrigeration unit backfed through a dead panel. I'm writing a transformer damage report and shutting the exterior line myself." "That's it?" "That's it." "You sure?" Nina's voice hardened. "Do your job, Terry. Sit in the truck." When his footsteps faded above, she turned back to Lena. "Here is how this works. I can bury tonight's power draw as a storm-related transformer failure. I can reclassify this building as an experimental mycology site for 6 months. I can keep state food inspectors out until you have test data, paperwork, and a buyer smart enough to protect you." Lena watched her carefully. "And what do you want?" 25%. Lena almost smiled. "That is a large number for a county official." "No," Nina said. "That is a small number for the person who knows every door Meridian uses when it wants a farm shut down." She pointed at the vault. "You are brilliant, Dr. Hart. You are also reckless enough to steal power in a blizzard and think nobody would notice. Rusk will eat you alive if you try to fight like a scientist." "What are you, then?" Nina leaned closer. "I'm the person who knows where he hides the knives." Lena extended her hand. Nina shook it. 3 weeks later, the second harvest filled 2 freezers. Nina had kept her promise. She hid the electrical anomaly inside a county storm report, filed the Creamery under an obscure pilot research category, and forced Lena to spend the last of her money on sanitation tests, vacuum sealers, and a generator that did not involve stealing from the grid. They still had no retail approval, no brand, no real company. What they had was 76 vacuum-sealed cuts of something no chef in America had tasted. Nina made one call. The name was Bram Hollis. Hollis owned a chain of private dining clubs, luxury hotels, and 2 of the most influential restaurants in New York. More importantly, he hated Victor Rusk. 3 years earlier, Meridian had used a supplier contract to crush one of Hollis's independent packing houses in Iowa. Hollis lost millions and never forgot a dollar. Nina arranged a midnight tasting at the Silver Anvil, Hollis's flagship restaurant in Manhattan. Lena arrived in a rented refrigerated van, wearing the only clean shirt she owned under her work coat. Nina carried the cooler like it contained evidence. The executive chef, Mireille Voss, met them in the prep kitchen with open contempt. "You have 5 minutes," Mireille said. "Then security removes you and your mystery meat." Lena opened the cooler. Inside lay a thick rib roast with marbling so fine it looked drawn by hand. Mireille's expression shifted, not trust, curiosity. She lifted it with gloved hands, turned it under the light, and frowned. "No farm tag." "Private reserve," Nina said. "No breed stamp." "Private reserve." "No slaughterhouse code." Lena said, "Because nothing was slaughtered." Mireille looked up sharply. Before she could answer, the service doors opened and Bram Hollis walked in. He was a broad man in an overcoat worth more than Lena's truck, with a face built for courtrooms and kitchens. He took one look at the roast. "That better be important." Mireille did not answer him. She was already seasoning it. The roast hit the steel. Every cook in the room turned. 10 minutes later, Mireille sliced a piece and placed it on a white plate without garnish. She handed the fork to Hollis. He chewed once, twice. His eyes narrowed, like he had been personally insulted by the quality. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "Copper Falls," Lena said. "How many head?" "None." How many pounds can you deliver? 8,000 per cycle. More if we expand. Hollis stared at her. Nina stepped in. Meridian's premium restaurant contracts are vulnerable. You know it. Rusk knows it. We can give you a product better than his, cleaner than his, and cheaper than his. But we need capital and cover. Hollis set the fork down. Price. $44 a pound wholesale, Lena said. Murray laughed under her breath, not because it was high, because it was low. Hollis understood immediately. Meridian's best product cost him $69 before freight. I want East Coast exclusivity. No, Lena said. Nina's eyes flicked toward her. Hollis raised an eyebrow. Lena swallowed fear and kept her voice steady. You can have first distribution rights for 90 days. You can have audit access to our safety records. You cannot have the organism, the facility, or control. Hollis smiled for the first time. There she is. He reached into his coat and pulled out a phone. By morning, you'll have $700,000 in escrow. By next week, you will have counsel, insurance, and refrigerated transport that doesn't look like it was stolen from a bait shop. He leaned closer. If you embarrass me, I will ruin you faster than Rusk can. Lena took the threat the way he meant it, as respect. Then don't undercook it, she said. The money changed the creamery from a hiding place into a fortress. Solar panels disguised as roof repairs went up under the snow. The old loading dock was rebuilt behind tarps. The vault got new pumps, redundant filters, backup power, and a coded hatch Nina insisted on installing after calling Lena a genius with the survival instincts of a wet napkin. Production doubled, then doubled again. Every 24 days, unmarked refrigerated trucks arrived at 3 a.m. and left before dawn. In New York, chefs began whispering. A new reserve beef was appearing in locked dining rooms. No farm name, no auction records, no cattle trail. It won blind tastings against Wagyu, grass-fed heritage breeds, and imported cuts that cost more than most people paid in rent. Within 1 quarter, Meridian's premium food service division dropped 9%. 9% was not a dip. It was a wound. Victor Rusk called an emergency meeting before sunrise. On the conference screen, one phrase appeared in restaurant invoices, chef texts, and distributor notes. Copper Falls Reserve. Rusk did not blink. He remembered Nina's call. He remembered Lena Hart. He pushed a button on the conference table. Bring in Varick. Anton Varick entered without knocking. Varick's title was Director of Asset Protection. He was built like a locked door and had the patience of a man who had been paid to wait outside many rooms where laws were being broken. Rusk handed him a folder. Lena Hart is producing something under the old Harker Creamery. I want to know what it is. I want a sample. I want her frightened enough to stop. Varick read the first page. Legal channel? Rusk looked at him. Varick closed the folder. Understood. 2 nights later, a black SUV stopped half a mile from the Creamery. Varick and 2 men crossed the frozen drainage ditch behind the building, wearing dark winter gear and carrying thermal optics. The Creamery itself looked dead, but the snow around its foundation told the truth. A long rectangle behind the loading wall had softened and refrozen in a pattern too clean to be weather. Heat was rising from below. Varick whispered, "Substructure." Inside the vault, Lena was awake. She was inspecting a new lean protein line when the perimeter alarm flashed silently on her tablet. 3 heat signatures, North Ditch, moving fast. Her first thought was not fear. It was shame that Nina had been right. She hit the blackout switch. The growth hall went dark, except for the red exit strips along the floor. Above her, the side door cracked. Boots moved through the old processing room. Lena pulled on her clean hood and clipped the emergency oxygen cartridge to her belt. She could not beat 3 men, but she knew the building better than they did. The hatch lock snapped. Varick's voice dropped through the shaft. "Dr. Hart, we only need to talk." Lena said nothing. The first man descended, then the second, then Varick. The moment all 3 boots touched the vault floor, Lena sealed the hatch from the remote panel. The men turned. A low mechanical growl filled the vault. Lena opened the inert purge system. White vapor burst from the overhead lines, filling the room in seconds. It was not poison. It was not fire. It was the same cold blanket she used to protect the culture during pressure shifts. But in the dark, with visibility gone and the temperature falling hard, panic did the rest. 1 man cursed, another stumbled into a mesh rail. Varick pulled a respirator over his face and moved toward the control glow. Lena slipped under the hanging curtains. She knew the path by touch. Stainless rail, drain channel, pump bank, workbench. A shadow moved in front of her. She swung a wrench once, low and hard. The man went down, screaming. A gunshot cracked through the vapor. The sound crushed the room flat. Lena dropped behind the pump bank as a round shattered a viewing panel above her shoulder. The vapor thinned. Varick stood 10 feet away, pistol raised, red laser on the center of her clean suit. "Enough!" Lena froze. Varick looked past her. Even he stopped for a second when he saw what hung in the room. Rows and rows of red marbled sheets. No animals, no carcasses, no waste, no stink. Only a quiet, biological factory under an abandoned ruin. "What did you do?" he asked. "Built what your boss pretended to fund." Varick cut a square from the nearest growth sheet, sealed it inside a thermal evidence pack, and backed toward the ladder. "Then he'll enjoy owning it." "That line is unstable," Lena said. Varick smiled behind the mask. "We have better labs." "Not better instincts." He left her locked below for 11 minutes with a damaged pump, a shattered panel, and 1 missing sample. By the time Nina arrived at 4 in the morning, Lena was sitting on the floor beside rack 7, still in the clean suit, staring at the empty cut. Nina climbed down fast. "Are you hit?" "No." "Did they take culture?" "Yes." Nina's face went gray. "Then we lost. Meridian can sequence it, file around it, call it theirs, and drown us before the first real inspection." Lena did not answer. Nina grabbed her arm. "Lena!" Lena looked up. Rack 7 was not Marrow Prime. Nina blinked. "What was it?" "A trap." 800 miles away, Victor Rusk stood behind safety glass in Meridian's flagship research center. A senior biochemist named Dr. Pavel Ionescu had the stolen sample under sterile light. The red square of tissue sat inside a sealed chamber, perfect and silent. "It's fungal," Ionescu said, unable to hide his awe. "But the fiber architecture is structured like muscle. The lipid deposition is deliberate. This is years ahead of what she had clearance to attempt." Rusk's voice cut through the room. "Can you scale it?" "With the right accelerator, yes. Her cycle appears slow. 24 days, maybe more. If we introduce Yield Max 9 to the growth bath, we may compress division." "Do it." Ionescu hesitated. "We should map the regulatory elements first." "I said, do it." A robotic arm injected a measured dose into the sample chamber. For 12 seconds, nothing happened. Then the tissue folded inward. Not growth, collapse. The red darkened to black. The beautiful fiber structure disassembled into sludge. Sensors screamed as heat spiked, pressure climbed, and every diagnostic on the wall turned red. Ionescu shouted for containment purge, too late. The chamber ruptured inward, not outward, drowning itself in sterile foam and corrosive black runoff. The lab's emergency system locked the floor, erased the active data terminals, and flooded the room with neutralizer. Millions of dollars in equipment died in under 1 minute. Behind the glass, Rusk did not move. A technician vomited into a trash can. Ionescu stared at the ruined chamber and whispered, "She baited us." Rusk's face changed. It was the first time anyone in that building had seen fear turn into rage before it found language. He pulled out his phone and called Washington. Copper Falls woke up to helicopters. 3 black aircraft came low over the tree line, shaking snow from the pines. A convoy of armored SUVs, hazmat trucks, and mobile command units swallowed the road to the Harker Creamery. Neighbors came to porches in robes and boots. Dale Crone stood in his driveway, coffee forgotten in his hand. "Lord," he whispered, "she really was doing something." Inside the vault, Nina was panicking. "They're here. Federal warrants. FDA, FBI, environmental response. Rusk bought the whole alphabet." Lena was not in a clean suit. She wore a pressed white shirt, a wool coat, and the tired calm of someone who had already spent her fear. "Open the doors." Nina stared at her. "Absolutely not." "Open them." Outside, Special Agent Malcolm Price lifted a megaphone. "Dr. Lena Hart, this is a federal enforcement action. You are under investigation for illegal biological production, environmental contamination, and interstate distribution of unapproved food material. Exit the building with your hands visible." The front door groaned open. Lena walked out first. Nina followed, hands raised, cursing quietly. Agents rushed them. Lena was forced against the frozen brick, wrists zip-tied behind her. Nina hit her knees in the snow. Agent Price stepped close. "Where is the biological agent?" Lena nodded toward the building. "Under the floor. Please tell your team to use the boot wash." Price looked at her like she had insulted him. For 2 hours, the Creamery became a federal crime scene. Hazmat crews entered the vault. Portable labs opened in the snow. Soil cores were taken from the frozen yard. Air samples ran through field analyzers. Every freezer, tank, hose, notebook, and cut of Copper Falls Reserve was logged and photographed. Nina sat on the bumper of an SUV with her hands bound, shaking from cold and dread. "It's over," she said. Lena watched the Creamery door. "No, you don't know that." "I do." "How?" Lena looked at her. "Because this time, I gave them what was real." The lead environmental scientist came out of the building holding a tablet. He looked confused enough to frighten the agents more than bad news would have. "Agent Price," he said, "we have a problem." "Pathogen?" "No." "Toxin?" "No." "Contaminated runoff?" "No." "The vault is cleaner than most hospital food prep rooms. The organism is contained. The protein samples show no animal pathogens, no fecal contamination, no heavy metal uptake from the site. The air is filtered. The wastewater is isolated. I don't know what we were told, but it doesn't match what's down there." Price's jaw tightened. "What is it?" The scientist looked back at the Creamery. "Food." A black sedan rolled through the barricade before Price could answer. Bram Hollis stepped out with a legal team behind him and a camera crew behind them. Price turned. "Who allowed you past the line?" Hollis smiled. "My lawyers." A woman in a dark coat stepped forward. She was Hollis's lead counsel, Ada Mercer, and she carried a binder thick enough to ruin someone's week. "Agent Price," she said, "you are currently detaining the chief scientist and compliance officer of a documented experimental mycology facility operating under county pilot status, private safety audit, and pending federal review. My client holds distribution agreements for research samples classified as edible fungal protein, not slaughtered meat." Price snatched the binder. "This is being sold across state lines." "Not as beef," Mercer said, "as Copper Falls Reserve Mycoprotein." Every private buyer signed research market disclosure. Every batch was tracked. Every sample is cleaner than the affidavit that brought you here. Nina stared at Lena. You filed all this? Lena shook her head slightly. Nina did. Nina opened her mouth, then remembered the forms she had signed in a panic months earlier. The obscure categories, the boring compliance language, the paperwork she had thought was only buying time. Lena had turned it into armor. Mercer continued, louder now. Your warrant is based on Meridian Foods' sworn claim that this facility contained an uncontrolled biological hazard. Your own field team has disproved that claim. Meanwhile, we have evidence of Meridian-directed trespass, armed interference, theft of proprietary biological material, and destruction of a private research facility. At the edge of the barricade, news cameras rose. Hollis had brought the press. Price looked from the clean test results to the cameras to Lena Hart, still zip-tied in the snow. Cut them loose, he said. No one moved. Price turned. Now! That was the moment Victor Rusk lost control of the story. By noon, every business network in America was running the same image. A fired scientist standing outside a ruined Wisconsin creamery while federal agents packed up behind her. The headline wrote itself. The $1,100 creamery that frightened the food giants. Lena spoke once, and only once, to the cameras. She held up a sealed package of Copper Falls Reserve. Her hands were steady. Companies like Meridian told us the food system had to be cruel, chemical, and consolidated because scale was the only way to survive, she said. That was never science. That was a business model. We grew this under a building they called worthless, on land they called ruined, with no slaughter and no chemical accelerator. The future was not waiting in a boardroom. It was waiting in the dark. The market heard her. So did the people Meridian had spent years squeezing. Within 48 hours, Meridian stock dropped 36%. Hollis announced a $500 million expansion partnership with Lena's company. Private restaurants converted contracts. Regional grocers demanded pilot access. Farmers who had been trapped under Meridian feed agreements began sending Lena letters, photos, and old invoices as evidence for the lawsuits that followed. Then the federal warrants came again. This time they went to Meridian. Anton Varick was arrested first. Dr. Ionescu cooperated by morning. Victor Rusk was taken from the glass office above Lake Michigan in the same tailored calm he had used to destroy other people's lives. But his hands shook when they cuffed him. The charges were not dramatic enough for what he had done. Corporate espionage, witness intimidation, false statements to federal investigators, obstruction, illegal retaliation against a whistleblower. But it was enough. Rusk's empire did not explode. It curdled, one contract at a time. A year later, the Harker Creamery no longer looked abandoned. The broken roof was gone. The old brick shell had been preserved, cleaned, and reinforced behind glass walkways and solar tiles. Beneath it The buried aging rooms had become the Copper Falls Institute for Fungal Agriculture, a federally inspected production and research center that employed half the town that used to laugh over diner coffee. The first public production line grew 42,000 pounds of clean protein a month. Not enough to feed the world yet, enough to prove the world had been lied to. Dale Crone, who once said Lena was burying bodies, now drove a forklift in the loading bay and told visiting reporters he had believed in her from the start. Nina Sloan became chief operating officer. Her brother's debt vanished with her equity stake. More importantly, so did the fear that had made her answer Victor Rusk's calls. On the first warm day of spring, Lena walked beyond the rebuilt loading dock to the pasture behind the institute. There were no production animals there, only 12 rescued dairy cows from a closing farm near Eau Claire. Old, slow, bony creatures with soft eyes and numbered ear tags that no longer meant anything. Lena leaned on the fence in her old gray coat. Nina came up beside her with a tablet in one hand. "Hollis says the Chicago pilot sold out in 9 minutes. Lena watched a cow tear at the new grass. "And the worker fund? First checks went out this morning. Nebraska, Iowa, Ohio. The medical claims Meridian buried are getting paid." Lena nodded. For a while, neither woman spoke. Then Nina looked at the old creamery wall, glowing in the late sun. $1,100, she said. Lena reached down and lifted a handful of dark Wisconsin soil from the edge of the fence. It was clean now. Not perfect, not untouched, but healing. She let it fall slowly through her fingers. "They thought I bought a ruin," Lena said. Under their feet, far below the quiet pasture, the growth rooms hummed on in the dark. "No," she said softly. "I bought room for the future to breathe."